Hi, it's Shan Wu with Under Color of Law. I know I feel like I'm on Weekend Update because I just got off the television here, so I'm still all dressed up. But Under Color of Law analysis about these newest deportation efforts by the Trump administration to Venezuela. Now, this is a very complicated topic because it involves things like the Alien Enemies Act that Trump is trying to reuse, even though we're not at war. But I just want to keep this very focused on the specific confrontation with the D.C. federal court that has been going on, and we're going to keep an eye on that. We'll talk more about this other idea of using a wartime law to deport both U.S. citizens as well as non-U.S. citizens who might be in the U.S. But let's just focus on what's going on with this case. So this is a confrontation between the Trump administration and Judge Boasberg in D.C. Full disclosure, Boasberg and I were colleagues back in the day at the U.S. Attorney's Office. A very, very smart judge. He's not going to take any foolishness about this, and he's not. The controversy is there was a lawsuit filed to stop the United States from deporting alleged members of a Venezuelan gang, and they were going to be deported not to Venezuela, but to El Salvador. Why to El Salvador? Well, Venezuela wasn't going to take them, and El Salvador apparently worked out a deal to be paid $6 million by the Trump administration to take prisoners, deportations. It's like the Trump administration is outsourcing private prisons now to other countries. That's why they're going to El Salvador. However, the ACLU filed a lawsuit about this. They went before Judge Boasberg, who was working on the weekend, called this emergency hearing on a Saturday evening, brought them together, and listened to what the Trump administration's justification for doing this was, and Boasberg was quite explicit. He gave a verbal order to them that said, nobody leaves the country right now until we get to more fully consider this. If there are planes in the air, turn them around. There are some breaks during that hearing. Then he finished it by issuing a written order basically saying the same thing. What's happening in the meantime? Well, through analysis, for example, by the New York Times, Just Security, what's happening during that hearing was following that hearing, before the written order had come out, planes were taken off. So there are about 3 planes that had taken off. One of them took off after the written order was done. Why is that important? Because the Trump lawyer from DOJ wanted to make this ridiculous differentiation between the written order versus the verbal one. Now, they were all over the place in terms of their reasoning when Boasberg called them back for hearing. But this was one of the arguments that they were making. Take a listen to the White House spokesperson being questioned about this ridiculous rationale.
You keep talking about the judge's written order, which hit the docket Saturday night at about 7:26 p.m., but he issued a verbal order before that at about 6:45 and 6:48 p.m. based on the court hearing, a verbal order from the bench. Does the White House feel the need to comply with a verbal order from this judge?
Again, as I said, all of the planes subject to the written order of this judge departed U.S. soil, U.S. territory before the judge's written order.
But what about the verbal order, which of course carries the same legal weight as a written order, and said for the planes to turn around if they were
Well,
in the air?
there's actually questions about whether a verbal order carries the same weight as a legal order, as a written order, and our lawyers are determined to ask and answer those questions in court.
So this is a ridiculous legal justification. I mean, it's hardly worth saying there's no difference between a judge verbally ordering something versus writing it. But here's a real life example, right? If I'm in court, I'm questioning witnesses, other side objects, judge says sustained. I just blow through it and keep questioning. Can I do that? Because what am I going to say? Oh, sorry, judge, that's not enough that you made that ruling. You needed to put it in writing, so it's not in writing. I'm just going to ignore it. Obviously, makes no sense whatsoever. That was their first argument that they're trying to make. In the meantime, Tom Homan, the border czar guy, makes a different argument. Take a listen to that.
We're not stopping. I don't care what the judges think. I don't care what the left thinks. We're coming.
Yeah. I just love seeing you going through these protesters just crunching on the apple as their liberal tears just flood the hallway. Tom Homan, thanks so much for joining the program.
Now, Homan is a very blustery guy, and what's really silly about this is Trump doesn't need to make a stand on this point, which is we think the judge is wrong, so we're ignoring his arguments. Obviously, that's blowing through the rule of law. What you actually do is you appeal it, right? But maybe Trump's not really calling the shots here. Here's somebody who seems like they are more like the person really calling the shots on this.
The district court has no ability to in any way restrain the president's authorities under the Alien Enemies Act or his ability to conduct the foreign affairs of the United States. This judge violated the law. He violated the Constitution. He defied the system of government that we have in this country.
Now, this is not the way the Justice Department litigates cases, okay? The way that they're doing this, it's more like a scorched earth private civil case brought by kind of bad civil attorneys, which is we'll just make any argument we can think of, throw it all on the wall, see what's going to stick here. And legally speaking, it's not going to stick. But what Judge Boasberg needs to do is to drill down on this and get some answers. Part of his frustration in hearing was he couldn't get any answers. The Justice Department lawyer at one point said, there's classified national security reasons here. I'm not authorized to say this. Boasberg pointed out to him that Boasberg had been chief of the FISA court, which deals with highly classified secure information, so it's not like he can't manage a classified issue, but more to the point, there's no evidence there is any national security classified issues going on other than the lawyer saying that. So at one point, Boasberg told him, look, if that's going to be your reasoning, you need to answer me and tell me and present documents or evidence as to why this is classified or can't be disclosed in open court, right? It's not that because you have classified information, it can never be disclosed anywhere in a court proceeding. You do it in private, they call it in camera, maybe just to the judge. They even talked about, doing it with the so-called husher, which is just a white noise machine that goes on in court. So there are a million ways that the information can be brought before the judge, because the idea that you can't ever bring something before a judge because it's national security makes no sense. You'd be just walling off the executive branch from any review, which is, of course, exactly what they want to do. So Boasberg also said to them, quote, you're saying that you felt you could disregard the order, because it wasn't a written order. And he referred to that as a stretch, which is, he's being polite. It's more than a stretch. It's utter nonsense. And he also said about the classified information, national security point, he said to them, quote, if the government takes the position that it will not provide that information to the court under any circumstances, it must support such position, including with classified authorities, if necessary. Because the point, again, is you can't just invoke, national security, we get to do whatever we want. You have to put something forward for it to be reviewed. Boasberg also told them that he would issue a written order with his questions he wanted answered after the hearing. He said, quote, since apparently my oral orders don't appear to carry much weight, unquote. And he also told them that, we can have some of these proceedings sealed, the response can be sealed, all to basically undermine their point of, it's classified, we can't talk about any of this. Now, what's important to remember here is about the basis for these deportations, which, again, we'll continue to follow this and take a deeper dive on some of the underlying law, because here we're just focusing on what's happening in court and DOJ's refusal to answer the judge's questions, trying to obfuscate and keep everything in the dark on it. But I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that the Trump administration has a right to change immigration policy, but they need to do it the right way, meaning it has to be done with due process. They can't just decide to start deporting people without A, giving any reasons for it, and B, having the process involved for, are these reasons valid? Obvious point. These are alleged gang members that got sent on the plane. How do we even know they were gang members? How do we know who they are? How do you connect them to the gang membership? Number two, the Alien Enemies Act, which I promise I won't get into too much, only applies to non-citizens. How do we know all these people were non-citizens? Were they here with legal status? Were they here illegally? Were they U.S. citizens who happened to get swept up in a raid, maybe because of racism, or they had tattoos? All these things need to be answered. At the end of the day, maybe the administration has a legal basis to deport people, but they have to explain what that basis is, and it has to be tested in court. That, as with most things, Trump, is what's missing here. Any type of transparency, any type of facts that a court can actually review. So that's what the problem is right now, and we're going to keep an eye on that. Boasberg has scheduled another hearing for Friday, and we'll keep an eye out for that. So that's it for now. Good to talk to you, and thanks again for the replies and comments. They're really helpful. Keep them coming. All right, talk to you soon.
In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.